inflation, of course, continues to be a major pain point in India, specifically inflation in vegetables, pulses, essential items like tomatoes, ginger. Before we specifically go to Manipur, where inflation is at about 12%, in the range of about 11 to 12% at an all-time high. India specifically, vegetable price inflation, tomato, government is trying to do its best with tomatoes. It is, and we discussed this yesterday as well, trying to fetch tomatoes from where it's in abundance, your southern states, western states, bringing it up to north, ensuring that tomato prices in the north will come down. They haven't really come down. They may be selling it, the government may be selling it for 50 rupees a kg in certain parts of certain mandis, but from what I know, personal experience, bought tomatoes last evening, they were over 100 rupees a kg.
Right. So, I think before we come to tomato inflation specifically and what the government is trying to do, since Mohit is with us, I'd like to touch upon the Burger King story also. Okay. And I think that's a listed company in India. And Mohit, this happens to be now the third QSR and the second burger company after McDonald's and Subway respectively to remove tomatoes from its burgers. So, if you want to hop on to the next Burger King outlet anywhere near your house, it's unlikely that you will find a slice of tomato in your burger.
And it's very interesting how they explained it. They said tomato is on vacation.
On vacation, exactly. So tomato on vacation, and the Burger King stock this morning up almost 4.5% or so. It's a low priced stock, if I can call it that, trading just at about 120 rupees or so this morning, but up about 4.5%. Do you see a linkage between tomatoes exiting, going on vacation, and the stock performing a little better this morning?
I think, look, that's a funny coincidence, but yeah, markets do tend to take sometimes these pieces of news in a much more positive sense than what you and I can make out of it in on a TV discussion, honestly. But yeah, I think taking out tomatoes from the menu perhaps could mean a little bit of a cost constraint, but I'm not sure how much tomato as a constituent was a part of their cost and the overall what is the overall impact on its profitability because of this call. But I think it's more sentimental and it's more indicative of that they're conscious of the overall price scenario. And yeah, I think coming back to the food inflation, honestly, I think at 7.44%, it's a fairly steep print which has come out. And if you see, the Indian bond yields have already, from a low of around 6.9, has touched a peak of has touched back to around 7.25, 7.29 levels, which is indicating that RBI might perhaps be forced to increase rates. Right, and that's not a very happy situation to be in. Honestly, if the inflation doesn't tame down, there's been uneven monsoons across the country. You have droughts at some place, and you have floods in the other parts of the country. So the overall inflation scenario seems to be going out of control, especially in an election era when your 3 state elections are due this year. I think government will go all out to tame the inflation, and which might even mean that RBI will be even pushed further hard to try and curtail prices, and that can mean rates going up or CRR being again raised as we saw in the last monetary meet, right? So I think markets is a bit jittery on that part. Honestly, inflation to my mind is the biggest concern area right now, and that should continue to be under watch.
All right, it's going to be a tough job for RBI. I think the task is cut out by the way of numbers that came out in July. September, of course, will be crucial numbers to track, and upon which I think RBI will have to take a call on whether to hike rates or not.
Mohit, my only sort of quarrel with that point of view is that can RBI really do much about taming food inflation when the problem is on the supply side and not as much on the demand side? It's not that people have extra money and hence the demand for tomatoes has gone up and RBI wants to suck that money out of their pockets, but rather it's crop which has been damaged because of untimely rains and not a great monsoon. So can the RBI's policy measures really do anything sizable in taming food inflation?
Well, look, I think absolutely I agree with you on that count. And I think perhaps that's one of the key reasons why RBI has restrained itself from raising rates till now, even though the inflation print has not been under RBI's stipulated 4% kind of a range, right? And I think that continues to weigh upon it. But sometimes, look, I think the politics of it and the optics of it matter more than the reality of it. And honestly, I think it's more
Especially in
about
an election
inflation
year, I might
expectations
add, Mohit.
than the actual inflation.
Especially in an election year or a run up to the election year, the
Yeah.
optics would become a little more visible.
Yeah, totally. Honestly, I think election year is a very, very big draw, and government will go all out on this thing, improving the supply side, as you rightly said. Maybe it's easing up imports or doing whatever on that extent. But even the expectation of inflation has to be curbed by RBI, right? So whether it's tightening the overall liquidity scenario, which RBI is already going about, or perhaps raising rates, as you, which I'm still unsure about, but you never know. If push comes to shove, maybe RBI will be forced to do one small rate hike to try and curb the expectation of inflation in the economy.
All right, and you know, certain interviews that have come out in the newspapers this morning, that of Finance Secretary, and the government bites that have come out since yesterday, also mean that government is taking note of it. In fact, Finance Secretary, in an interview to a prominent newspaper this morning, said that we are very proactive, and we'll do everything we can to try and control inflation. So, of course, all hands on deck as far as government is concerned. We'll have to wait and watch out for what more administrative actions will be taken. Mohit, thanks very much for joining with your inputs. We will, of course, come back to you very, very soon.